Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlicker shills, debt slaves, serfs, peasants, vassals, meat sacks, fearmongers, doom merchants, World War III peddlers. I'm a useful idiot. Welcome. And let's talk about the world today in the sense that I read an article recently, and I've read a couple articles like this over the last several years. And there's even books on this topic about the fact that, relatively speaking, the world is at peace. And I think that's really important to remember. And I think it's especially important to remember in the midst of all this material that we see on YouTube constantly. Just this constant barrage, both from the mainstream media and the alternative media, of all this doom out there. And of course, the most annoying for me has always been World War III is just around the corner. And World War III has been just around the corner pretty much most of my life, having grown up in the late, or actually grown up in the 60s, and the 70s weren't that great either, as far as the mood in the world. But anyway, um, this we're in the situation now where not only is there all this doom and gloom in the world, and everything is accentuated so that people have this picture of the world, um, but we also have this extreme polarization, and it's not just in the United States. We find it globally, of course, in this so-called clash of civilizations between Christianity and Islam, and the West and the East, and all that. And it, both sides fully embracing their own bullshit. And I hate to say that. I know that a lot of people are going to be annoyed, but each supposed side has their own belief systems, their own dogma, and their own sense of self-righteousness, and it's a bigger topic than right here to discuss the merits of these different arguments. But anyway, I, I think it's really important to have a clear picture of the world, so that not only do we have a more realistic view of what is going on in the world, but the forces that are manipulating us, because that's the crucial part of this examination, is the fact that we have all these different uh, uh, elements that are selling a world of chaos, and they're making a lot of money off it, and achieving a lot of power off it. And what I mean by that is the fact that we have a media that wants and needs a world of chaos, because they're selling you those stories. Those are the kind of stories that people want to watch, and that's what the news gives them. So we get this concentration. There's one shooting in the United States in the news that night, and it's going to be on TV, and everybody's going to see that shooting, and think that the entire United States is being engulfed in a world of gun battles and a bloodbath. I exaggerate a little bit, but for the most part, um, there is a concentration, as everyone knows, and there's always been in yellow journalism, sensationalism, and it's what sells papers, and it's what sells TV, and it's what sells advertising. And so the media craves it, and the people crave it, because otherwise the media wouldn't give it to them. And that also goes for the alternative media. And in fact, at this point, I would almost say, especially goes for the alternative media. And then we have industry and the military, the military industrial complex, and every industry that is connected with that, because there's a whole periphery of industries that feed into the military industrial complex. So it's much more huge than just the arms manufacturers themselves. There's all the subsidiary industries, and they have a need to generate money by creating this world of chaos, or the perception thereof. And certainly the military constantly is moving from one threat to another. We've gone from Venezuela to Al Qaeda to ISIS to Russia, and it just goes back and forth, whoever the new boogeyman is. But we have to maintain, or the United States has to maintain, this illusion that somehow Russia still has these dreams of being an evil empire, and that China is going to somehow overtake the United States, and Chinese hordes will run across North America and take us over. These visions are preposterous, but the fact is the government and the military feed into these paranoias in order to generate more support for more giant military. And that's why, too, we end up with the fact that the military has to keep built up for giant conventional wars, just in case, even though the history is showing us over the last several decades that we're going to have all these low-level regional conflicts going on that don't demand a giant conventional military. But and then the government certainly has a lot of invested in creating this perception of a world of chaos, because the government, of course, is going to solve all those problems, and they need to wave these policies out for the bewildered herd and the masses, and make promises of being able to cure this chaos or address this chaos. And then we also have, of course, corporations, just in general, who make tons of money off of wartime posturing. And this has always been true, like banks, for example. Banks are making lots of money off of wartime activities and economic chaos around the globe. And so they have a lot invested in creating this perception of a world of chaos as well, because a world of chaos creates volatility, and that's where the money's made. And so we also have pharmaceutical companies that also feed off a world of chaos. So everyone has some sort of mental illness and needs to take these pills, and so we have record levels of people taking these pills in order to better function in this world of chaos, which also apparently includes this internal world of chaos that only pharmaceutical companies can fix. And then the entertainment industry certainly thrives on this perception of a world of chaos, and they help contribute to it as well, with a lot of action movies and a lot of movies loaded with propaganda, whether it's The Boys of Abu Ghraib or American Sniper or any of these other movies with close collaboration with the military in order to make, and they help sell these ideas that there's a world of chaos out there, and the United States global police will swoop in like avenging angels to do right around the globe. So when you look at the reason why all these people are going to push a world of chaos and a world that's not relatively as a peace, because they're selling weapons, they're selling advertising, they're increasing ratings, they're selling their policies, they're selling entertainment, and they're selling pills. And the mainstream media depends on it, and the alternative media certainly depends on it. That's one of the problems why I have with the alternative media, and myself included. One of the reasons why I sometimes lack motivation to keep doing these videos is because I'm not really going to change anyone's mind, and I hate being associated with the doom merchant industry, the World War III crowd. And as much as I adamantly oppose a lot of views of these pundits, I get lumped in with them, and then of course I suffer because everyone's going to compare me to people like Alex Jones and C. Green and Stixhammer and all this, and I'm definitely not in that ball game. I'm not out to save anyone or build a media empire. But let's get back to this world of chaos. There's this whole concept too that there's violence in the streets, and all this violence by and to cops, and in fact it's so bad that 70% of Americans think that crime is up, but actually crime is at historic lows. As figures from 2013 show, there's 4.5 deaths in 100,000, the lowest rate since 1957. We now have the same murder rate by ratio as 1957. And of course, that's basically meaning compensating for the population increase. And so we have New York City, for example. In 1990, it had 2,245 murders, and in 2010, only 536. So it's still a lot, but comparatively, for people to think that there's way more crime than there ever has been is just not true. In fact, New York City in 2015 is down to 357. I mean, that brings up another point about the distortions of these murder rates, because I was looking at the fact that Chicago had 500 murders, gun murders, last year, and that you have to understand that these concentrated areas like Chicago and New York that have these high levels of murders drive the average rate up for the entire nation. So people look at these gun numbers and they think that the entire nation is being engulfed in gun violence, when actually it's, for the most part, a handful of very volatile urban areas. And so there's distortion there as well. In total, we have 36,000 gun-related deaths in 2013. Granted, that is a fairly large amount, but look at the fact that there's 88,000 deaths a year associated with alcohol, and 10,000 drunk driving deaths, and so there's no calls to regulate alcohol more right now, but there is for guns. But I don't want to get into that argument right now. I just want to show these figures. 30 people a day involved in drunk driving accidents, and in fact, a third of gun deaths are alcohol related. That's another thing. When you hear these gun deaths, a lot of those are suicides. I don't have the exact number right here, but so there's a lot of violence that's been being perpetrated. People killing themselves, which is still a form of violence, but very personal, and shouldn't be factored into a world gone mad and a world descending in chaos. And then another example of this fear-mongering and doom merchants to create this atmosphere to perpetrate these various agendas, as that report that came out back in 2015 that said there was 355 mass shootings in 2015. So making the idea that there was a mass shooting every day during the year, and the methodology included gang shootouts and robberies gone bad, and bad drug deals and reckless shootings, and one story is even 2 kids with shooting with BB guns included in these mass shootings. So if you get Congressional Research Service counted 25 actual mass shootings, so exaggerated by a considerable degree. Only 25 qualified as mass shootings, and frankly, I would be surprised that there isn't more of this, not less of this, because as Gerald Celente said, we live in an era where you got nothing to lose, and you lose everything, you're going to lose it. And there's a lot of pressure on a lot of people, particularly certain segments of society, and so we're going to see this kind of tragic violence, and it's going to get exaggerated and used for agendas. In the case of the United States, of course, the agenda is going to be gun control. And but there's also this misperception as well that the United States has all these enemies, and that's part of this world of chaos, and that somehow the United States is not safe. And the United States is not only safe, the United States is safer than any nation has ever been in history, and we continue to see examples of that. For example, there hasn't really been any terrorist attacks per se. A handful of nuts loose in the United States, and dozens and dozens and dozens of cases of entrapment, and no attacks since 9/11, without debating whether 9/11 was a terrorist attack or not. But this world of threats from China and Russia and the Middle East and Latin America, and if you look at around the world, predominantly the world is at peace. And if you really think about it and just put a globe in front of you and look around, certainly there are regional conflicts. There's drug violence. There's all sorts of unfortunate events happening all over the world, but we see a concentration and distillation of it in the alternative, in the mainstream news, and it just creates a misperception. Although there are some tragic conflicts happening in different regions around Africa, for the most part, Africa, the continent, is more at peace than it's been historically. And we also have Latin America, even though we hear about constantly, again, these regional conflicts and low-level conflicts and drug wars and the like. Latin America is historically at very peaceful levels. The United States crime levels are down, where this is historically at peaceful levels. Canada, the Eurozone, even with all the bombings recent and migrant crisis and the like, the Eurozone certainly of all areas around the world is historically at peace. Certainly, and in the Middle East, certainly there's a concentration of violence there. But once again, we see large swaths of these areas still functioning and still participating in a world of peace and going about their business and living their lives, and Southeast Asia as well. Certainly historically there at more levels of peace than they've been in a long time, looking at places like Vietnam and Korea and Japan and China and the history of that region, and in Australia certainly at peace. So I don't know, you take a look around the globe and you see a lot of peace out there. So I'm starting to think maybe everybody needs to kind of chill out a little bit, painting all these pictures of imminent doom in World War III. There's a lot of tragedy in the world. There's a lot of tragic events that we get to see almost up close and personal in the news every day, and I think that it's just distortion. And I bring that up too because I recently had a regular who was very disappointed that I didn't have the same enthusiasm for his political candidate choice, and thought I was naive and misinformed because I didn't see this chaos around the globe and all these things that are happening and the impending World War III. And so I thought it would be nice to take a good sober look at the fact that generally speaking the world is at peace. And one article I'm attaching below had a great quote from Nietzsche and talked about the quote spiritualization of hostility unquote, and the quote profound appreciation of the value of having enemies unquote when you're a nation state. And I really like that idea, that term, the spiritualization of hostility. We've gotten to the point now where hate is becoming a religion. And so it used to be that people hated each other because of religions, and they still do, but now hate is becoming a religion unto itself, and certainly fear has become a religion unto itself. And well, anyway, that's all I want to say. It's really not as bad out there as everyone seems to think it is, aside from the tragedies we see every day. So be thankful for your own blessings. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too.